Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first story is titled, Neighbors Try to Force Me to Take Down My Basketball Hoop. I Fight Back and Win. It was a hot summer day when I decided to install a basketball hoop in my driveway. My two boys were ecstatic, and we spent hours playing together, sweating and laughing under the blazing sun. It was a perfect way to spend our summer days. We never imagined that our basketball hoop would cause so much trouble. A few weeks after we had installed the basketball hoop, I received a notice from the HOA. The notice stated that I was violating the neighborhood regulations by having a basketball hoop in my driveway. It was an unexpected blow, and I couldn't believe that my harmless hoop was causing such a problem. The notice also stated that I needed to remove the hoop immediately or face penalties. I was confused and frustrated, but I decided to follow the rules and fill out the necessary form. I completed the form, and it took several weeks for me to receive a response. To my dismay, the response was that my request had been denied. I was shocked and couldn't understand why a simple basketball hoop was causing so much trouble. I was determined to find out the reason for the denial, and I made inquiries with the HOA board. It turns out that the board had received several complaints from my neighbors, claiming that the basketball hoop was unsightly and reduced the value of their properties. Some neighbors also claimed that the noise from the basketball games was disturbing their peace and quiet. I was disappointed and angry that my neighbors hadn't approached me directly to discuss their concerns. I was also surprised that the HOA was siding with the neighbors without considering the impact on my family. I decided to fight back and get the basketball hoop approved. I started gathering support from my neighbors who had young children and would benefit from the basketball hoop. I went door to door and collected signatures on a petition to support the installation of the hoop. I also attended the HOA meetings and spoke about the importance of having a healthy and active lifestyle for children. My efforts paid off, and I managed to get the HOA to reconsider their decision. They agreed to review my application again and promised to be fair in their judgment. After a few weeks of anxious waiting, I received a notice from the HOA that my application had been approved. I was ecstatic and couldn't wait to share the news with my boys. We continued to enjoy our basketball hoop for several months, but the peace was short-lived. A few months later, I received another notice from the HOA stating that I was once again violating the neighborhood regulations. I was puzzled and couldn't understand what I had done wrong this time. I made inquiries with the HOA board, and it turned out that the complaint this time was about the basketball net being left out overnight. I explained that it was a simple oversight and I had intended to bring it in but had forgotten. However, the board was unforgiving and threatened to take legal action against me. I was once again frustrated and angry that such a small matter was causing so much trouble. I decided to fight back and hired a lawyer to represent me. My lawyer was able to argue my case convincingly, and we managed to avoid legal action. However, the tension between me and the HOA board had reached an all-time high. At the next HOA board elections, I decided to run for a position on the board. I wanted to ensure that the board was fair and just in its decision-making process. I campaigned tirelessly, knocking on doors and speaking to my neighbors about the importance of having a responsive and fair HOA board. The election was fiercely contested, but I managed to win a seat on the board. I was determined to make a positive impact and ensure that my neighbors were treated with fairness and respect. I proposed several changes to the HOA regulations, including clearer guidelines for basketball hoops and other play equipment. My proposals were met with some resistance, but I was able to persuade my fellow board members of the importance of these changes. We worked together to revise the regulations, making them more specific and easier to understand. We also created a committee to oversee the approval process for basketball hoops and other play equipment. The committee was made up of members from the neighborhood, ensuring that decisions were made with the best interests of the community in mind. After much hard work and dedication, the new regulations were approved by the HOA board. They were met with widespread support from the community, and I felt proud of the work that we had accomplished. I could finally rest easy, knowing that my basketball hoop would be allowed to stay, and that my neighbors would be able to enjoy the benefits of play equipment in their own backyards. As time went by, my boys continued to play basketball in the driveway, enjoying the sunshine and the company of their friends. We hosted many friendly games, and our neighbors even joined in on occasion. It was a joy to see the community come together and bond over a simple game of basketball. Years later, I received another notice from the HOA board. It wasn't about my basketball hoop, but rather about a proposal to build a community park. I was thrilled to see that the board was finally taking steps to provide more recreational opportunities for our community. I attended the board meetings and offered my support for the proposal, knowing that it would benefit everyone in the neighborhood. The proposal was met with widespread support, and the park was built. It was a beautiful space, complete with basketball courts, playgrounds, and picnic areas. It quickly became a hub of activity for the community, and I felt proud to have played a small part in its creation. Looking back on my experience, I realized that sometimes fighting for what you believe in can lead to positive change. I was able to stand up for my rights and make a difference in my community. I learned that it takes hard work, dedication, and a willingness to work with others to make a real impact. And most importantly, I learned that sometimes even the smallest changes can have a significant impact on our lives. My opinion, this story shows the importance of standing up for what you believe in, even in the face of opposition. It's inspiring to see how the protagonist worked tirelessly to ensure that his family's right to have a basketball hoop in their driveway was respected. I also appreciate the way the story shows how the protagonist was able to bring about positive change in his community by fighting for a fair and just HOA board. It's a reminder that even small acts of courage can make a big difference in the world around us. The next story is titled, A Clash Over Parking Space: How a Dispute Over Parking Turned into a Legal Battle. Living in a big city is a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, there's always something to do, somewhere to go, and something to see. On the other hand, finding a parking spot can be a nightmare. This was the predicament I found myself in when I moved to a new apartment complex downtown. The building was old, with no dedicated parking, and the street parking was always full. It was a frustrating situation, to say the least. One day, as I was coming back from work, I found a car parked in my spot. I was livid. I had paid for that spot and had been using it for months. I had even put a sign up with my name on it, but here was a car parked right in front of it. I left a note on the car, politely asking the owner not to park in my spot again. The next day, the car was still there, and I left another note, this time more firmly requesting the owner not to park in my spot again. Days passed, and the car was still there. I decided to take matters into my own hands and called a tow truck to take the car away. A few hours later, I got a call from the owner of the car, a woman named Karen. She was furious and demanded that I return her car. I calmly explained that she had parked in my spot and that I had left 2 notes asking her not to park there again. But Karen refused to listen and instead threatened to sue me. I thought the matter was resolved when Karen left, but little did I know that it was just the beginning of a legal battle. A few weeks later, I received a letter from Karen's lawyer, demanding that I pay for the damages to her car caused by the tow truck. The letter threatened legal action if I didn't comply. I was taken aback by the letter. I had done nothing wrong. I had a parking spot that I had paid for, and Karen had parked in it without my permission. I consulted a lawyer who advised me to stand my ground and fight the case, and so a legal battle began. Over the next few months, I spent a lot of time and money fighting the case. I had to provide evidence that Karen had parked in my spot without permission, and that I had left 2 notes asking her not to park there again. It was a stressful time, and I felt like I was being harassed for something that wasn't my fault. But finally, justice was served. The court ruled in my favor, and Karen was ordered to pay for the damages caused to her car by the tow truck. It was a huge relief, and I thought the matter was finally over. But I was wrong. A few days later, I found my car vandalized. The tires were slashed, and the paint was scratched. It was clear that someone had done it deliberately. I immediately suspected Karen, but I had no evidence to prove it. I reported the incident to the police, but they couldn't do anything without concrete evidence. The incident left me shaken, and I didn't know what to do. I was scared that Karen might come after me again. I decided to take matters into my own hands and install security cameras outside my apartment. It was a costly expense, but it gave me peace of mind. The cameras were installed, and for a few weeks everything was quiet. But one day I received a call from a neighbor informing me that Karen was back. She had parked her car in my spot again and was refusing to move it. I rushed down to the parking lot, and sure enough, there was Karen standing next to her car, arms crossed, and a smug look on her face. I couldn't believe it. After all that had happened, she had the audacity to come back and park in my spot again. I approached her and asked her to move her car, but she refused, saying that she had the right to park there. I tried to reason with her, explaining that I had paid for that spot and that she had no right to park there. But she wouldn't budge. She said that she was a lawyer and that she knew her rights. I was at a loss. I didn't want to call the police again, but I didn't know what else to do. I decided to call my lawyer and seek his advice. He advised me to document the incident and take pictures of Karen's car in my spot. I did as he instructed, and after a few minutes, Karen got into her car and drove away. But I knew that the matter was far from over. A few days later, I received another letter from Karen's lawyer demanding that I pay for her legal fees. I was outraged. She had parked in my spot, and now she was trying to make me pay for her legal fees. I consulted my lawyer again, and he advised me to countersue for harassment and vandalism. He said that Karen had a pattern of behavior and that it was time to put a stop to it. And so another legal battle began. This time I was prepared. I had evidence of Karen's harassment and vandalism, and I was ready to fight for my rights. The case lasted for months, and it was a stressful time for me. But finally, justice was served. The court ruled in my favor, and Karen was ordered to pay for the damages caused to my car, as well as my legal fees. It was a huge relief, and I thought that the matter was finally over. But a few weeks later, I received another letter from Karen's lawyer. This time, she was demanding that I pay her back for the damages caused to her car by the tow truck. I was furious. She had caused me so much trouble, and now she was trying to make me pay for something that wasn't my fault. I consulted my lawyer again, and he advised me to countersue for defamation. The case went to court, and this time it was Karen who was on the back foot. The court ruled in my favor, and Karen was ordered to pay for the damages caused to my car, as well as my legal fees. She was also ordered to issue a public apology for defaming me. It was a huge victory, and I finally felt like I had won. Karen had caused me so much trouble, but I had stood my ground and fought for my rights. I learned that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even if it's difficult. Update. It's been a few years since the incident, and I have since moved to a new apartment complex. But I still think about Karen from time to time. I wonder what she's up to and whether she has learned her lesson. But one thing's for sure. I'll never forget the lesson I learned from this experience. Always stand up for what's right, no matter how difficult it may seem. In my opinion, this story highlights the importance of standing up for your rights, even in the face of adversity. It's a common issue in big cities to have disputes over parking spaces, and it can be frustrating when someone parks in your spot. However, the protagonist in this story didn't back down and fought for what was rightfully theirs. It's inspiring to see that justice prevailed in the end, and it's a reminder that we should always stand up for what's right, even if it's difficult. It's also a cautionary tale about the consequences of engaging in petty disputes, which can escalate quickly and lead to legal battles. Overall, it's an interesting story that provides valuable lessons about perseverance, standing up for yourself, and resolving disputes in a legal and peaceful manner. The next story is titled, "A Stranger Tells Me, Smile. It Could Be Worse. Instantly regrets it." It was a typical Friday morning. I had just gotten off the bus and was walking to work. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and the street was busy with people rushing to their destinations. As I walked, my mind was lost in thought, trying to plan my day at work and catch up on emails. I guess I was so focused that I must not have been smiling, because out of nowhere a man appeared beside me and said, "Smile, it could be worse." I didn't think much of it and just gave him a small smile, not really in the mood for small talk. But to my surprise, the man kept walking with me, chatting away about the weather and the neighborhood. He seemed nice enough, but something about his energy made me uncomfortable. The man introduced himself as John, and as we walked, he asked me about my job and what I do. I told him that I was a nurse and worked at a local hospital. John's face lit up and he said, "Wow, you must see a lot of interesting things there." I shrugged and told him that it was just a job like any other, but he persisted, asking me about the worst thing I had ever seen at the hospital. I hesitated for a moment, not sure if I wanted to share such a dark story with a stranger. But something about John's kind and gentle demeanor made me feel like I could trust him. I told him about a young girl I had seen who had been in a terrible car accident, how her parents were killed on impact and she was left paralyzed from the waist down. Tears filled my eyes as I spoke, and John listened with rapt attention. When I finished, he took my hand and said, "I'm so sorry that you had to see that. You're doing important work, and I'm sure you make a difference in people's lives every day." I thanked him for his kind words, and we parted ways as I arrived at my workplace. The day at the hospital was long and grueling as usual. I had to work overtime to cover for a colleague who had called in sick, and by the time I left, I was exhausted. As I walked out of the hospital, I noticed a man sitting on a bench, looking lost and disoriented. It was John. He looked up when he saw me, and I could see that something was wrong. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide with fear. I rushed over to him and asked him what was wrong. He told me that he had been diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of cancer and that he had been given only a few months to live. Tears streamed down his face as he spoke, and my heart broke for him. I held his hand and comforted him as best as I could, telling him that he would get through this and that there was still hope. He thanked me for my kindness, and we hugged before parting ways. A few weeks later, I received a letter from John's family. They informed me that he had passed away peacefully in his sleep and that he had left a small gift for me as a thank you for being there for him in his final days. Inside the package was a small note that read, "Smile, it could be worse." Underneath the note was a beautiful bracelet made of delicate pearls and gold. I was moved to tears, and I wore the bracelet every day as a reminder of John's kindness and the fragility of life. Update. A year after John's passing, I was walking to the same hospital where I worked. As I walked towards the hospital, I couldn't help but think about John and the impact he had on my life. His passing had taught me to cherish every moment and to never take anything for granted. As I arrived at the hospital, I noticed a commotion at the entrance. A group of people were gathered around, and I could hear someone shouting for help. I ran over to see what was happening and saw a woman lying on the ground, her face contorted in pain. I immediately sprang into action, calling out for a stretcher and gathering medical supplies. I could see that the woman was in critical condition and that every second counted. As I worked to stabilize her, I noticed something around her wrist. It was the same bracelet that John had given me. I felt a pang of sadness as I realized that this woman must have been someone important to John. After several intense minutes, the woman was stabilized and taken to the operating room. As I walked away, I felt a sense of pride and gratitude for being able to use my skills to help someone in need. A few days later, I received a letter from the woman's family. They informed me that she had survived the incident, thanks to my quick thinking and expertise. They also told me that the woman had been a close friend of John's, and that the bracelet I had seen on her wrist was one that he had given her before he passed away. The letter went on to say that John had spoken often of me in his final days, and that he had told his friend about the kind nurse who had comforted him in his time of need. The woman's family expressed their deepest gratitude and appreciation for my kindness and care. Reading the letter, I felt overwhelmed with emotions. I realized that John's legacy lived on through the people whose lives he had touched, and that his kindness had inspired me to make a difference in the world. From that day on, I wore the bracelet with even more pride and gratitude, knowing that it was a symbol of the connection between John, his friend, and me. And every time I looked down at my wrist, I was reminded of the power of human connection and the impact that a single act of kindness can have. In my opinion, this story was truly heartwarming. It showed how a simple act of kindness from a stranger can have a profound impact on someone's life. I was impressed by how the author was able to weave together the different threads of the story, from the initial encounter with John to the dramatic ending at the hospital. It felt like a complete and satisfying narrative with believable characters and realistic situations. I especially appreciated the update at the end, which added another layer of depth and meaning to the story. Overall, I thought this was a beautiful and touching story that left me feeling inspired and hopeful. The last story is titled, "The Struggle of an Abandoned Daughter Fighting for Her Rights Growing Up." I always knew I was different from the other children. While they had their parents' love and support, I had to rely on my father's sister to raise me. You see, my biological parents abandoned me when I was only 2 years old. They said they couldn't afford to take care of me, and they never contacted me again until I was an adult. Fast forward to a few years ago, and my life was finally stable. I had a good job, a loving partner, and a close relationship with my cousin and her family. One day, I received a call from my biological parents demanding that I buy my younger brother an apartment. I was taken aback by their request, but I still tried to reason with them. I explained that I didn't have the means to buy my brother an apartment, and even if I did, it wasn't my responsibility. However, my parents were persistent, and they threatened to take legal action if I didn't comply. Feeling overwhelmed, I consulted with a lawyer, and he advised me to negotiate a parental maintenance fee with my parents. He explained that under the Civil Code of China, adult children have a legal obligation to support their parents, regardless of abandonment or estrangement. At first, I was hesitant to comply, but I didn't want to get caught up in a legal battle. So I agreed to pay a parental maintenance fee of 500,000 yuan, hoping it would be enough to satisfy my parents. However, things didn't end there. My parents soon demanded more money, claiming that the original fee wasn't enough. They said they needed the money to support themselves as they were getting older and couldn't work. I was torn between my moral values and my legal obligation. I knew my parents had abandoned me and didn't deserve my support, but I didn't want to go against the law. So I decided to negotiate a new parental maintenance fee with my parents. After several months of back-and-forth negotiations, we finally agreed on a fee of 300,000 yuan. It was a significant amount of money, but it was a compromise that I could live with. However, my parents' demands didn't stop there. They started harassing me and my partner and even showed up unannounced at our home. I was terrified and didn't know what to do. Eventually, I decided to take legal action against them. I filed a restraining order and sought help from a women's rights organization. They provided me with legal and emotional support, and I felt empowered to fight for my rights. The case went to court, and I was relieved when the judge ruled in my favor. My parents were ordered to stay away from me and my partner, and they were fined for their harassment. But the drama wasn't over yet. A few months later, my parents filed a countersuit, claiming that I had cheated them out of the parental maintenance fee. They said that I had promised to pay them a higher amount, but I had never followed through. I was shocked by their accusations and knew that I had to fight back. So I gathered all the evidence I had and hired the best lawyer I could find. The case went to court, and it was a long and grueling battle. But in the end, justice prevailed, and the judge ruled in my favor once again. My parents were ordered to pay me a sum of money for their false accusations, and they were once again fined for their harassment. Update. Since the incident, I've been working on healing from the trauma and rebuilding my life. I've started therapy to address the emotional toll that the ordeal took on me, and I've been advocating for changes in the Chinese legal system to protect adult children from abusive or manipulative parents. I've also been volunteering with the women's rights organization that helped me during my legal battle, hoping to help other women in similar situations. It's been a difficult journey, but I've learned a lot about myself and my values. I realize that I have the strength to stand up for myself, even when it's against my own family. I've also learned that the legal system can be flawed, and there are still many issues that need to be addressed, particularly regarding parental maintenance laws. Since my story went public, I've received an overwhelming amount of support from people all over the world. Many have shared their own experiences with family estrangement and parental abuse, and it's been comforting to know that I'm not alone. One of the most memorable moments was when I received a letter from a woman in a similar situation. She had been abandoned by her parents and was also being sued for parental maintenance. She had read about my story and found hope and strength in my words. It was a powerful reminder that my struggle was not in vain and that my story could inspire others to stand up for themselves and fight for their rights. In conclusion, my story is one of resilience, perseverance, and hope. It's a reminder that we all have the power to fight for what's right, even in the face of adversity. And it's a call to action for the Chinese legal system to reform its parental maintenance laws and protect the rights of adult children who have been abandoned or abused by their parents. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.